I traveled across the country to see the new home of my son, whom I had raised by sacrificing everything. My old pickup, reliable but scarred from years on the road, rumbled into the pristine cul-de-sac of Harmony Lakes, Texas. The sun, a brutal orange orb descending over perfectly manicured lawns, glinted off polished SUVs and brick façades that seemed to hum with silent judgment. This was Noah's world now, a world of manicured lawns and curated lives, miles and aspirations away from the dusty construction sites and cramped apartments where I'd built his. He met me at the curb, his smile a well-practiced curve that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Don't tell the neighbors you're my father, Dad," he whispered, glancing nervously at a woman watering roses next door. "Just be an old friend from Oklahoma." The words hit me like a blow from a framing hammer, sharp and unexpected. An old friend from Oklahoma. Not the man who'd poured every ounce of his sweat and soul into building him a future. The betrayal stung, a bitter taste in my mouth, contrasting my unwavering love with his evident shame for his ordinary blue-collar father. He'd regret it, I knew. The consequences of this carefully constructed lie would inevitably crumble his perfect world. "All right, Noah." My voice came out flat, devoid of the weary affection I'd carried across 2 states. Years of raising him, of working double shifts on construction sites, of selling my antique tools, the ones I'd inherited from my own father, to fund his fancy business school dreams. And now I was a mere acquaintance. The lie sat heavy in my throat, like a mouthful of concrete dust. He positioned himself between me and the neighbor's impeccably kept yard, his tailored suit jacket catching the faint evening breeze. Everything about him screamed success. The expensive watch, the subtly styled hair, the polished confidence that money seemed to buy. Everything, that is, except his eyes, which darted nervously toward the neighboring houses, perpetually on guard. "Beautiful weather for traveling," the neighbor, a man with a suspiciously perfect tan, approached with a practiced open warmth, wiping something from his hands. His robotic lawnmower hummed silently behind him, another symbol of suburban perfection. I forced my weathered face into something resembling a smile. Yes, long drive from the heartland. The words felt foreign, scripted. A role I was unwillingly playing in my son's carefully constructed life. The neighbor nodded enthusiastically, launching into small talk about Texas weather and rising property values, while I stood there, like an actor who'd forgotten his lines. Noah's relief was palpable when the conversation ended. He practically vibrated with nervous energy, his gaze scanning the street for other potential witnesses to my arrival. I grabbed my duffel bag, worn canvas that had traveled with me through countless construction jobs, and slung it over my shoulder. The neighbor waved goodbye, returning to his immaculate lawn. His mower whirred back to life, a mechanical whirring that seemed to drown out the quiet cracking of my heart. Noah turned toward the house, his expensive loafers clicking against the pristine driveway. I followed him up the walkway, past flower beds that looked like they'd been plucked from a home and garden magazine. Every step took me further from the man who'd driven miles to see his son and closer to whatever stranger I was supposed to be. The front door loomed ahead, dark wood and imposing, leading into a life where I apparently didn't belong. My calloused fingers tightened around the bag's strap as Noah fumbled with his keys. Behind us, the neighbor's mower continued its steady rhythm, a relentless soundtrack to my transformation from father to fiction. Noah pushed open the front door, and I stepped into what felt like a museum exhibit titled, "How the Other Half Lives." Cool air conditioning hit my face, carrying the artificial scent of ocean breeze instead of home-cooked meals. The living room stretched before us like a showroom floor, all coordinated, expensive, and utterly devoid of warmth. "Sarah's in her studio finishing up some designs," Noah said, his voice artificially bright. "Let me show you around." I followed him through rooms that belonged in a design portfolio. The furniture looked like it had never truly been used, all sharp angles and neutral colors. My work boots felt too loud against the polished concrete floors, each step announcing my intrusion into this pristine world. The walls told their own story. Framed photographs lined the mantel and hallway. Sarah's family skiing in Colorado, romantic shots from European honeymoons, the kids at private school graduations, professional portraits in expensive frames. Not a single picture included me. "Lots of memories on these walls," I said, my voice carefully neutral. Noah's step faltered slightly. "That's from our Italian trip last year. Sarah knows all the best vineyards there." In the kitchen, quartz countertops gleamed under recessed lights that probably cost more than my monthly pension. Noah quickly moved a familiar cookie container, my homemade pecan sandies, from the counter to a cabinet. Even my gifts were being hidden. "We're doing a cleanse now," he explained, without meeting my eyes. "But the kids might try your cookies." "Might?" The word hung in the air like a question mark. Sarah appeared as if summoned, a sleek tablet still clutched in her hand. She held up one finger, the universal signal for "important people must wait," while finishing a rapid-fire conversation. When she finally hung up, her smile was perfectly practiced. "We're glad to have you here, John. Noah's told me so much about you." Her handshake was firm, calculated to demonstrate confidence without seeming aggressive. Everything about her screamed success. The designer dress, the understated jewelry, the way she moved through the house like she owned not only the property, but everyone in it. "Beautiful house," I said, running my hand along the cool quartz island. "Solid foundation." Something flickered in Sarah's eyes at the word foundation. She knew, of course. Noah would have had to explain how they'd afforded the down payment for this showcase. Welcome to the channel. Please subscribe to the channel and comment whether you like the story or not. Acknowledging my contribution would complicate their narrative. "Noah has excellent taste," she replied smoothly, deflecting credit away from uncomfortable truths. The guest room felt like a hotel suite. White bedding, generic artwork, a card on the nightstand reading, "Welcome guests," in elegant script. No family photos here either. No hints that the man staying here had helped make any of this possible. I set my duffel bag on the pristine white bedspread, the worn canvas looking like a mistake against the expensive fabric. Through the window, I could see the neighbor still working on his lawn, living his own version of suburban perfection. The sound of Sarah's phone buzzing filled the silence. Another important call requiring her immediate attention. Noah hovered in the doorway, looking anywhere but at my bag or my face. "Dinner's at 8, he said. "Just make yourself comfortable." Make yourself comfortable in a room designed to ensure no one ever truly could. The dining room chandelier cast sharp shadows across crystal glasses and china plates arranged with military precision. I took my assigned seat at the table's end, physically separated from the family cluster at the other side. The symbolism wasn't lost on me. I was literally at the margins of their carefully orchestrated life. Sarah commanded the head of the table like a corporate boardroom, carving an expensive roast with surgical precision. Noah positioned himself as the perfect supporting actor, serving and smoothing conversations like a professional host. The teenage kids barely looked up from their phones, earbuds partially visible despite dinner table rules. Only my 6-year-old grandson, Leo, offered genuine warmth, reaching toward me from his booster seat with chubby fingers and an unguarded smile. In this room full of performances, his reaction was the only honest one. "Got promoted to regional director last month," Sarah announced, her voice carrying the satisfaction of a woman accustomed to impressive headlines. "Now we can afford even more of life's luxuries." Noah beamed at her with practiced adoration. "Yesterday we attended the governor's charity gala. Such fascinating people. A Dallas neurosurgeon and the CEO of a tech startup that just went public." He rattled off credentials like collecting trading cards. Each prestigious connection, another badge of social climbing success. The 15-year-old grunted something that might have been acknowledgement. The 13-year-old asked if he could be excused early. "I had a good year too," I offered, during a brief lull. "Finished the Miller House renovation, complete foundation rebuild, custom cabinets throughout." The words landed like stones in still water, creating ripples of uncomfortable silence. Noah's fork paused halfway to his mouth. Sarah's attention immediately shifted to her wine glass, studying the vintage label with sudden fascination. "Noah, tell us about that new merger deal," Sarah said quickly, steering the conversation back to safer territory. And like that, my contribution to the evening and to their lives was erased. Noah launched into a detailed explanation of legal strategies and billable hours, while I sat there remembering different dinners. Kitchen table conversations where Noah shared his college dreams, while I calculated how many overtime shifts would pay for his textbooks. Celebrations when he graduated, when he got his first job, when he called to say he'd found the perfect house. "This is for our family, Dad," he said. "Then, a place where we can all be together." I looked around this dining room, where togetherness meant performance, and family meant hiding your history. The baby gurgled and reached for my face again, his tiny fingers touching my cheek with innocent affection. At least someone at this table recognized family when he saw it. Sarah checked her phone between bites, the blue screen reflecting off her glasses. "International client, different time zones, you understand." I understood perfectly. Everything here had a hierarchy, and I ranked somewhere below international business calls. Noah filled silences with nervous chatter about neighborhood events and social obligations. The children responded in monosyllables when directly addressed. I sat at my isolated end of the table, watching my son conduct this orchestra of artificial harmony, while my homemade cookies remained hidden in his kitchen cabinet. When dinner finally ended, the family dispersed like actors leaving the stage. Sarah disappeared to her home office for more important calls. Noah whisked Leo upstairs for his bathroom routine. The teenagers vanished to their rooms with barely a good night. I was offered a choice: television in the living room or rest in the guest room. Both options meant being alone, which seemed to be the evening's theme. "Guest room sounds good," I said, though sleep felt impossible. Noah nodded with visible relief. "Bathroom's right across the hall. Towels are fresh." I stood at the clear dining table for a moment, looking at the family photos on the distant wall. Professional portraits, vacation memories, milestone celebrations, a complete visual history of their life together. None of them included me. Sleep wouldn't come. I lay on the pristine white bedding, staring at the ceiling, where shadows from passing cars painted brief stories of movement in a motionless room. It became midnight, and still my mind churned through dinner conversations. Noah's nervous orchestration, Sarah's casual dismissals, the children's indifference to their grandfather. The house settled into silence around me. Central air hummed its artificial lullaby while I replayed every word, every glance, every careful redirection when I tried to contribute something real to their polished world. My wallet pressed against my hip through the thin pajama fabric. 40 years of carrying the same worn leather billfold, and tonight it felt heavier than usual. Not because of money, I'd never had much of that, but because of the papers folded carefully inside. Documents I saved because my father taught me to always keep the important stuff close. I sat up, pulled the wallet from my pants, draped on the chair. The overhead light seemed too bright, too revealing, so I used my phone's flashlight instead. Blue-white glow illuminated the first paper as I unfolded it with careful reverence. Property contract, my signature, bold and confident in black ink, dated 3 years ago, primary owner Samuel Sam Garrett, investment amount 80% of total cost. Noah's name appeared in smaller print, 20% based on financial contribution. $0, I whispered to the empty room. Primary owner, my signature everywhere. My phone's clicked softly as I photographed each page. Evidence, though I wasn't sure yet what I'd need it for. The second document showed the down payment source, my savings account cleaned out. The third revealed the tool sale receipts, 40 years of Craftsman and DeWalt reduced to numbers on a bank deposit slip. The house creaked overhead, someone walking to the bathroom probably. I froze until the footsteps faded, then continued my methodical documentation. I wasn't looking for confirmation, I already knew the facts. But seeing them laid out in legal terminology reminded me of something I'd almost forgotten, the difference between what's right and what's comfortable. Thirst drove me to the kitchen around midnight. I moved carefully across the polished concrete floors, avoiding the spots that had squeaked during the house tour. The refrigerator's ice maker rumbled to life as I filled a glass with filtered water that tasted like nothing. On my way back, I noticed the laundry room door standing slightly open. Sarah was organized to a fault. Everything had its place in her perfect world, but organization also meant filing systems, and filing systems meant records. The folder marked important documents sat on a shelf between detergent and fabric softener. My flashlight revealed mortgage papers, insurance policies, and a copy of our original ownership agreement. Noah's name on the monthly payment obligations, but the property deed told a different story. I photographed everything with the thoroughness of a man who'd spent decades checking blueprints for structural integrity. Details mattered in construction. They mattered here, too. Temporary, she said. I murmured to the documents. Nothing here looks temporary. Noah's name appeared in small print throughout, mine in bold headers. That told the real story. Who owned what? Who'd sacrificed what? Who'd built the foundation that others now stood on? By 3 a.m., I'd created a complete digital record of my legal position. The phone's battery showed 15%, and I had photos documenting 3 years of financial reality that dinner conversation had carefully avoided. Back in the guest room, I sat on the bed's edge, scrolling through images of contracts and bank records, legal proof of what my heart already knew. I wasn't a family friend visiting from Oklahoma. I was the foundation this house was built on, buried under layers of social pretense, but still solid, still bearing the weight of everything above it. Dawn light crept through the window as I finally set the phone aside. Sleep came easier now, though I couldn't say if it was from exhaustion or the strange peace that comes with absolute clarity. The next evening, Noah announced we'd been invited to the neighbor's party, with the enthusiasm of someone describing a military operation. He'd spent the day in careful preparation, arranging the house like a stage set, while I helped Sarah trim hedges and pretended yesterday's document review hadn't happened. "Wear this instead," he said, holding up one of his shirts, expensive cotton with a designer label peeking from the collar. "So you'll fit in better." I looked at my own flannel shirt, soft from years of washing, honest as worn denim, then at Noah's pristine offering, pressed and perfect as everything else in this house. "Sure thing." The borrowed shirt pulled tight across my shoulders made me move differently. In the bathroom mirror, I looked like myself, wearing a costume, trying to pass for someone I'd never been. Noah appeared behind me, adjusting the collar with nervous precision. "Remember, you're our friend from Oklahoma. We met through mutual acquaintances. Keep it simple." His reflection showed the strain of maintaining so many careful lies. I wanted to tell him about the documents, about legal ownership and financial contributions, but watching his hands shake as he fixed my collar told me this wasn't the moment. Noah was drowning in his own deceptions, and throwing more truth at him would only push him deeper underwater. The neighbor's backyard looked like a magazine spread. String lights draped between mature oak trees, an outdoor kitchen that cost more than most people's cars, furniture arranged with casual precision of professional staging. Bob, the host, greeted us with practiced warmth while grilling steaks that probably cost $50 each. "How's the commercial real estate investment business treating you, John?" Apparently, Noah had already established my fictitious occupation. "I helped with this house," I said, gesturing toward Noah's property line. Bob's cough sounded like a car engine refusing to start. "John, tell them about Oklahoma weather." The conversation flowed around me like water around a stone. Vacation homes in the Caribbean, private school admission strategies, wine vintages from trips to Napa. I listened to people casually mention spending more on weekend getaways than I'd made in good months. Watched them perform wealth like actors hitting their marks. Jessica, the neighborhood social coordinator, wore her status like jewelry. Every sentence polished to reflect maximum light. "We're considering private tutoring for Ethan. Ivy League admission is so competitive these days." Sarah nodded knowingly. "Our pediatrician's wife manages applications for NYC families. The connections are everything." Mike, who had apparently built some tech company from nothing, spoke in casual millions while sipping craft cocktails. His success story sounded rehearsed, like a TED Talk delivered over a backyard barbecue. "The secret is knowing when to scale," he explained to Sarah, who listened with the hungry attention of someone always calculating her next advancement. I attempted to contribute. "I built a foundation system last year that saved the homeowner $20,000 in structural repairs." "Construction consulting," Noah interjected quickly. "Very specialized field." But I'd already revealed too much. Bob's eyes sharpened with interest. "You work in construction? Must be quite different from investment real estate." "Different skills, same principles," I said, trying to navigate Noah's fictional minefield. "Foundation work mostly, making sure everything stays solid underneath." Noah positioned himself between me and the more dangerous conversations, steering me towards safer topics like weather and travel. But every subject seemed to lead back to money, status, connections, the currency of their carefully curated world. "Don't share everything, Dad," Noah whispered during a lull when others focused on Mike's latest acquisition story. "People judge quickly here." The word "dad" slipped out like confession he immediately regretted. He glanced around nervously, but no one had heard over the laughter about someone's yacht maintenance problems. As the evening progressed, I watched these people perform their prosperity with theatrical precision. Every conversation was a carefully choreographed display of success. Every casual mention of expensive purchases, a subtle assertion of hierarchy. They weren't just neighbors, they were an audience, evaluating each other's performances in the ongoing drama of suburban supremacy. The borrowed shirt felt tighter with each passing hour. I didn't belong in this theater, couldn't remember my lines in their ongoing production of perfect lives. Noah's relief when we finally said our goodbyes was almost palpable, his smile lasting just long enough for the final curtain call. Walking back across the perfectly manicured space between their world and ours, the neighbors' laughter faded behind us like applause from a show I'd never auditioned for. Noah removed his party smile the moment we stepped inside, exhaustion replacing performance like an actor stepping off stage. Sarah disappeared to her office for important international calls, leaving us standing in the foyer where expensive silence filled the spaces between us. "I need some air," I said, which wasn't entirely a lie. The garage door stood slightly open, caught by the evening breeze. Through the gap, I glimpsed organized shelves and the geometric shadows of stored boxes. Something about that glimpse pulled me forward, maybe the hope of finding something genuine in this house of careful presentations. I slipped through the opening and pulled the cord for the overhead bulb. Harsh light revealed Noah's organization system in full glory. Christmas decorations labeled by room, seasonal clothes sorted by size, lawn equipment arranged with military precision, everything in its place, everything serving a purpose in the machinery of their perfect life. But tucked behind the holiday storage, almost hidden by strings of carefully wound lights, sat a box labeled in Noah's handwriting, "Old Things," as if memories had expiration dates. I pulled the box forward, dust motes dancing in the light like ghosts of forgotten moments. The cardboard felt soft with age, corners worn from handling, and when I lifted the lid, time folded backward on itself. Photos, dozens of them, chronicling the life I'd almost forgotten Noah remembered. Noah at 6, with his front teeth missing, grinning beside the catfish we'd caught at Lake Texoma. Noah at 10, serious and proud in his first football uniform. I taught him to tackle hard and get back up the summer after his mother died. Noah at 18, in his graduation cap, my arm around his shoulders, both of us crying happy tears because we'd made it through the hard years together. My hands trembled as I lifted each photo. These preserved moments of when we were enough for each other, before social status and neighborhood approval became the measures of worth, before I became the embarrassing secret he had to hide in garages and careful lies. Beneath the photos lay treasures I'd forgotten I'd given him. The first baseball glove we'd bought together, stiff with age but carefully preserved. A Father's Day card made from construction paper and crayon where 8-year-old Noah had written, "Best Dad Ever," in careful block letters. The acceptance letter to his college, and folded inside it my own note of congratulation. I unfolded the paper, recognizing my younger self's handwriting. Never forget who stands with you through everything. Your foundation will always be solid because you're built on love, not just dreams. Always yours, Dad. He kept it, I whispered to the garage's patient silence, but hid it here. Every memory preserved, but locked away like shameful secrets. The fishing rod I'd bought him when I noticed his envy for the boys on the pier. The tools I'd given him for high school graduation. So you'll never need anyone to fix things for yourself. I'd said, not knowing he'd eventually need fixing from me. Here was our entire relationship, carefully maintained, but banished to storage. Love archived, but not displayed. History acknowledged, but never celebrated. I was looking at my son's heart, and it lived in a garage behind Christmas decorations and lawnmower fuel. I held up the fishing photo, remembering that perfect Saturday when grief over his mother's death had finally started loosening its grip on both of us. Noah had caught a bass bigger than his forearm, and we'd celebrated with root beer and beef jerky while the sun painted the lake golden. "I gave you everything," I said to that smiling little boy in the photo. "You gave me this garage." But even as I said it, I knew that wasn't quite fair. Noah had kept these memories when he could have thrown them away, hid them when he could have destroyed them. Maybe this garage was in exile. Maybe it was the only safe place he could preserve a father he loved but couldn't acknowledge. I repacked everything carefully, reverently, except for one photo. Noah and I, with our fish, both grinning like we'd conquered the world together. This one I slipped into my wallet next to the property contracts. Different kinds of proof, but proof nonetheless. The overhead light clicked off, plunging the garage back into gentle darkness. I stood there for a moment, holding both versions of my son, the child who'd needed me, and the man who'd learned to hide that need. Outside, the party's laughter had faded to memory, leaving only the sound of my footsteps on the concrete floor and the whisper of old secrets settling back into their careful storage. Saturday afternoon brought a clarity I hadn't felt since arriving. The morning passed quietly, family sleeping late after their social performance, while I walked the neighborhood with different eyes. Every manicured lawn, every perfect driveway, every symbol of their carefully constructed paradise suddenly looked different when viewed through the lens of ownership rather than exclusion. By noon, Noah had left for grocery shopping with the kids, and Sarah disappeared to her golf game with the same neighbors who devaluated my worth the night before. The house settled into afternoon silence, giving me the privacy I needed for important business. I sat on the guest room bed with my phone, scrolling through the contacts until I found the name I needed. Ben Carter, attorney at law. We'd worked together on my previous property purchase back when Noah was still in college and grateful for any help his old man could provide.
Ben, this is Sam Garrett. I need you to review the property contract for the house on Willow Creek Lane in Harmony Lakes. I want to understand my exact rights as primary stakeholder. His voice carried the same professional warmth I remembered from our earlier dealings. Of course, Sam. I have your file here. You're referring to the property where you provided the majority investment for your son's purchase, correct? That's correct. 80% ownership based on my down payment. Papers rustled through the phone speaker as Ben pulled the relevant documents. I spread my own copies across the white bedspread, photographing each page while we talked. The afternoon light streaming through the window illuminated every signature, every dollar amount, every legal clause that established my position. Without your signature, they cannot modify ownership percentages, transfer title, or make major financial decisions regarding the property. Ben explained with the patience of someone who'd handled similar family situations before. You maintain full legal control as primary stakeholder. I leaned forward, pen poised over a notepad I'd found in the guest room desk. What are my options if I want to exercise those rights? Legally speaking, you could reclaim full occupancy immediately. The current residents would be considered tenants without formal lease agreements. You could also require their signatures on any refinancing, force a sale, or establish formal rental arrangements. The words settled into my mind like pieces of a puzzle, finally finding their proper places. Not anger, justice. Not cruelty, clarity about what belonged to whom. I understand completely, Sam. Family property disputes require careful handling, but your legal position is quite strong. Do you want me to prepare any formal documentation? Ben asked. I organized the photos on my phone into a systematic folder while we discussed timelines and procedures. Each image represented a different aspect of my investment. Down payment receipts, original contracts, amendment forms that Noah and Sarah had never bothered to review carefully. Let me think about next steps, I told Ben. I'll call you back early next week with my decision. After hanging up, I sat in the quiet guest room surrounded by evidence of my legal standing. 3 days ago, I'd driven across the country hoping for connection with my son. Now, I held documented proof that I owned the majority of everything he had used to build his new identity. The irony wasn't lost on me. Noah had asked me not to tell the neighbors I was his father. What he hadn't realized was that I didn't need their acceptance. I owned the stage where their entire social performance took place. Car doors slammed in the driveway, followed by Noah's voice directing the kids to help with groceries. I quickly organized the papers back into their careful order, slipped the phone into my pocket, and emerged from the guest room as Noah struggled through the front door with organic produce and expensive wine. "How was your morning, Dad?" he asked, his voice carrying the casual warmth of someone who believed all family relationships operated within predictable boundaries. "Very productive. Got some important business sorted out." Noah smiled with the satisfaction of someone whose weekend plans were falling into place exactly as organized. "Great! Sarah and I are thinking of taking the kids to the ranch tomorrow. Would you mind watching the house just for the day?" I nodded with what I hoped looked like paternal accommodation, happy to keep an eye on things. The irony of watching my own property would have been amusing if it weren't so perfectly symbolic of everything wrong with our current arrangement. By 10 a.m., the expensive SUV had disappeared down the tree-lined street, taking Noah's carefully orchestrated family toward whatever ranch adventure Sarah's connections had arranged. I stood on the front porch waving goodbye like the helpful father-in-law, then turned back toward the house that legally belonged primarily to me. For the first time since arriving, I moved through the rooms without the performance of being a guest. No careful steps on polished concrete floors, no nervous glances toward family photos that excluded me, no pretending to belong in spaces I'd helped purchase. The transformation felt subtle but profound, like finally standing upright after years of unconscious crouching. The kitchen welcomed me with expensive appliances and Sarah's well-stocked refrigerator. I selected a prime Wagyu ribeye, the kind of cut that costs more than I used to spend on groceries for a week. But tonight felt like an occasion worth marking, even if I was the only one who understood why. Salt and pepper, that's all good meat needs, despite the cabinet full of exotic spices that Sarah probably used to impress dinner guests. I heated the cast iron skillet, the one practical pan among all the designer cookware, and listened to the steak sizzle with the honest sound of real food being prepared simply. "Steak the way he loved it as a kid," I said to the empty kitchen, remembering Noah at 8 years old, before European trips and organic everything, before the quinoa and artisanal phases. The memory triggered others, teaching Noah to cook after his mother died. Both of us learning that shared meals could heal grief in ways that words couldn't reach. Noah's favorite dinner had been steak and mashed potatoes. Nothing fancy, just comfort food, prepared with attention and love. I carried my plate to the patio where Sarah's outdoor furniture cost more than my first car. The evening light painted everything golden, including the perfectly manicured yard that I was effectively funding through my down payment investment. The steak tasted exactly like I remembered. Honest, straightforward, satisfying in ways that expensive restaurant meals never managed. I thought about Noah's recent obsession with keto diets and organic certifications, how my homemade cookies had been quietly hidden away like embarrassing evidence of our shared past. "Family," I said to the suburban silence. Funny how definitions change when money enters the picture. A memory surfaced. Noah calling 3 years ago about the house purchase, his voice bright with excitement and possibility. "This is for our family, Dad, our future together, a place where we can all belong." All belong. The phrase echoed differently now, surrounded by the evidence of systematic exclusion from the life my investment had made possible. I finished dinner as the sun painted shadows across the expensive patio furniture, then carried my dishes back to the kitchen, where every appliance gleamed with the sterile perfection of things that were purchased rather than earned. The dishwasher hummed efficiently while I explored the house with an owner's perspective rather than a visitor's careful navigation. In the living room, I settled into what I'd started inking of as my chair. The comfortable one, facing the window, positioned where natural light revealed the careful arrangement of family photos that documented everyone's happiness except mine. The fishing picture from the garage sat propped against my phone on the side table. Noah's 6-year-old grin, a stark contrast to the formal portraits surrounding us. The house felt different in solitude, not cold or unwelcoming, but honest in ways it couldn't be when occupied by people performing their various roles. Here was the foundation I'd built, the security I'd provided, the investment that gave Noah the freedom to construct whatever identity he chose. I'd built him a foundation. He'd used it to build walls against me, but foundations, I knew from decades of construction work, determined everything that could be built on top of them. Change the foundation, and everything above it had to shift accordingly. The thought was still settling into my consciousness. When car doors slammed in the driveway earlier than expected, Sunday evening, Noah's voice calling instructions about luggage, Sarah's deeper tones responding with the tired authority of someone accustomed to being in charge. They were home early, and I was sitting in my chair in my house, no longer pretending to be anyone other than exactly who I was. "Dad, thank you so much for watching the house." Noah burst through the front door with the energetic gratitude of someone whose weekend had gone exactly according to plan. The ranch was perfect, and knowing you were here made everything so relaxing. I stood from my chair slowly, deliberately, and watched his face register something different in my posture. Not the careful accommodation of a grateful guest, but the steady presence of someone completely comfortable in his surroundings. "My pleasure," I said, and meant it more than he could possibly understand. Sarah appeared behind him, hauling designer luggage and wearing the satisfied expression of a woman whose lifestyle had once again performed exactly as advertised. The children trudged past with the exhausted indifference of kids who'd been entertained all day and now wanted nothing more than their familiar bedrooms. "Everything goes smoothly here?" Sarah asked, already mentally transitioning to whatever work concerns would dominate her evening. "Very smoothly, actually. Had some time to think about property management, actually. Legal aspects of ownership and responsibility." Something in my tone made Noah pause in his unpacking routine. Sarah's attention sharpened with the automatic weariness of a lawyer detecting unusual phrasing in seemingly casual conversation. I pulled out my phone, scrolled to the photo folder I had organized yesterday, and held up the screen showing our original property contract, with my signature prominently in black ink. "You asked me not to tell neighbors I'm your father. I respected that. But this house is mine, and I'm reclaiming legal control of property decisions going forward." The words landed like physical blows. Noah's face drained of color so quickly I worried he might faint. Sarah's expression shifted through confusion, disbelief, and finally the cold calculation of someone realizing his assumptions had fundamentally been wrong. "Dad, that was temporary. You can't just... This is our home." "It's my home," I corrected gently. 80% mine, according to the documents you obviously never read carefully. "You live here because I provided the down payment that made it possible." Sarah grabbed her phone with the reflexive urgency of someone accustomed to solving problems through legal maneuvering. "I'm calling my lawyer. This is harassment, possibly illegal coercion." "Call whoever you want, Sarah. I'm not taking anything that isn't mine, just reminding everyone who the actual owner is and what that means for future decisions." The children had frozen in the hallway, sensing adult conflict without understanding its implications. Noah moved protectively between them and our conversation, his paternal instincts overriding his social panic. "But we have a life here," Noah's voice broke with genuine desperation. "The kids' schools, my friends, our position in the community. You can't destroy everything." I looked at my son, really looked at him, past the tailored clothes and carefully maintained facade to the frightened man underneath, who built his entire identity on foundations he'd never bothered to examine. "I'm not destroying anything, Noah. I'm clarifying who built what and who has the right to make decisions about it." Sarah paced the polished concrete floor, phone pressed to his ear, leaving increasingly urgent messages for legal contacts who weren't answering their phones on Sunday evening. His confidence cracked visibly as each call went to voicemail, reality slowly penetrating his assumptions about control and ownership. "The documents are clear," I continued, my voice steady despite the emotional storm swirling around me. "Ben Carter confirmed everything yesterday. Without my signature, you cannot modify ownership, refinance, or make major decisions about this property." Noah sank into the expensive sofa Sarah had probably chosen to impress clients, his hands shaking as the full implications hit him. Not just the house, but the social position it represented, the identity he'd constructed, the security he assumed was permanent. "Why?" he whispered, looking at me with eyes that held equal parts hurt and terror. "Why are you doing this to us?" I sat down across from him, close enough to see the tears he was trying to hide, far enough to maintain the clarity this conversation required. Ask yourself that question, Noah. Ask yourself why the man who made this life possible became someone you had to hide from your neighbors. The children had retreated upstairs,
their footsteps echoing through expensive halls. Sarah continued his frantic phone calls, his voice growing more strained with each unsuccessful attempt to reach legal salvation. The baby's cry drifted from somewhere in the house, innocent and immediate in its demands for comfort, in a house where no one felt particularly comforting. Noah's breakdown accelerated with the relentless inevitability of structural collapse. I didn't want to be ashamed. When they talk about their families, their histories, their backgrounds, I wanted to belong somewhere that mattered, and I didn't matter. He looked up at me with eyes that held decades of accumulated guilt and social climbing exhaustion. I became someone I don't recognize, someone who could hide his own father because his truck didn't match the neighborhood aesthetic. Sarah slammed his phone onto the court's counter, the sound echoing through the kitchen like a gavel of defeat. Every lawyer I know is either unreachable or tells me the same thing. Your documentation is ironclad, your legal position unassailable. I moved to the kitchen where the fluorescent lighting revealed every crack in our family foundation. Noah followed, his movements those of someone walking through debris after an earthquake. "What do you want from us?" Sarah demanded. Her lawyer's training finally kicked in despite personal desperation. Money? Recognition? Some kind of formal acknowledgement? "I want my son back. The one who used to be proud of where he came from, instead of spending energy hiding it." Noah collapsed against the kitchen island, his perfectly manicured facade completely shattered. "I'm sorry, Daddy. I'm so sorry. I don't know who I became or why I thought pretending you didn't exist would make me more worthy of this life." The baby's crying intensified from upstairs, a sound that seemed to pull Noah back toward his paternal responsibilities. Even as his adult world fell apart around him, he moved toward the stairs with mechanical necessity, pausing at the threshold between kitchen and hallway. "I love you," he whispered, without turning around. "I never stopped loving you. I just forgot how to show it honestly." Sarah stood among his expensive appliances, looking like a man who discovered his law degree couldn't rewrite fundamental truths about ownership and sacrifice. His phone buzzed with another returned call, but he didn't reach for it. "What happens now?" Noah asked from the stairway, holding our grandson against his shoulder, where his crying gradually settled into exhausted whimpers. I looked at my son, really looked at him, past the tailored clothes and carefully maintained facade, to the little boy who used to catch fireflies with me on summer evenings before life became complicated by status and appearances. Now, I go back to Oklahoma and handle this properly, through the right channels, with proper documentation, the way things should be done. He nodded with a resigned acceptance of someone who'd finally run out of alternatives to truth. "You'll understand soon enough what justice looks like when it's built on love instead of anger." The baby's breathing had settled into a peaceful rhythm against Noah's shoulder, creating a moment of genuine quiet in our storm-tossed evening. For the first time since arriving, I reached out and touched my grandson's tiny hand, feeling his fingers curl around mine with the trust that only innocence possesses. 2 weeks in Oklahoma had given me time to think, to plan, and to remember what really mattered. Noah called every day, his voice tight with anxiety about consequences he couldn't predict. Sarah researched legal precedents that wouldn't help him. I spent the time crafting something they'd never expect. Ben Carter leaned back in his office chair, reviewing the documents I'd had him prepare with the thoroughness of someone who'd seen every variation of family property disputes. "This is unusual, Sam. Most people in your position would simply reclaim the property or force a sale." "Most people haven't raised the son who betrayed them," I replied. signing the final page with the same careful attention I'd given every important document in my life. This teaches something different. The trust documentation spread across his mahogany desk like blueprints for a more complex structure than simple revenge. Educational trust for my grandson Leo, with the house as primary asset, vesting when he turns 25 with the college education requirement. Noah's family can continue living there, but the property will belong to someone who will understand its true value. The boy gets everything at 25, Ben asked, making final notations. If he earns it, college education demonstrated character, understanding of where the foundation came from, 25 years to learn what his father forgot. I drove home through familiar Oklahoma City streets, past diners and working-class neighborhoods where people didn't apologize for their truck models or their calloused hands. My house looked exactly as I'd left it, small, honest, comfortable in ways that had nothing to do with status symbols. The phone call to Noah was scheduled for 6 p.m., giving me time to sit on my front porch with the afternoon sun warming wood that I'd installed myself. The vast Oklahoma sky stretched overhead, reminding me of the vast perspective that comes from understanding your place in something larger than social hierarchies. Noah answered on the first ring, his voice carrying the strained brightness of someone expecting bad news, but hoping otherwise. "Hi, Dad. How are the legal arrangements going?" "Finished today," I said, rocking slightly in the chair I'd built from scrap lumber years ago. "Papers are signed. Everything's filed properly." Silence stretched between Oklahoma and Texas, filled with his fears and my carefully planned surprise. "The house isn't going to you, Noah." "What do you mean?" I let the words settle before delivering the revelation I'd spent 2 weeks perfecting. "It's an educational trust. Your son gets full ownership when he turns 25, provided he graduates from college." The silence this time felt different, confusion replacing dread, hope creeping into spaces where fear had lived. "Dad, I don't understand. After everything I did, everything I said, why would you give Leo the house?" "So he remembers where he came from. So he knows that foundations matter more than facades, that character counts more than connections." His voice broke with the sound of someone receiving unexpected grace. "Thank you, Daddy. I don't deserve this kindness, but thank you." "It's not kindness, Noah. It's an investment in him, in the future, in the hope that he'll value what his grandfather built instead of hiding from it." Through the phone, I heard familiar sounds, Sarah's voice asking questions, children playing in the background, domestic life continuing despite fundamental shifts in understanding. Noah's tears came quietly, the kind that wash away accumulated shame rather than expressing new grief. The trust pays for his education too, but he'll know who funded it and why. No secrets, no hidden benefactors, no family friends from Oklahoma. Can we talk more about this? About us? About how to move forward? I smiled at the sunset, beginning to paint my neighborhood golden, thinking about the grandson who'd inherit more than property. He'd inherit the story of sacrifice, love, and the difference between earning something and simply receiving it. Call me tomorrow, Noah. We have years to rebuild what got broken. After hanging up, I sat watching the sun disappear behind the Oklahoma horizon, holding the fishing photo from Noah's garage. The little boy in the picture had grown up to forget his roots, but his son would have the chance to remember them. My phone rang again, Noah calling back, his voice lighter than I'd heard in years. "Dad, I just wanted to say Leo's first word was grandpa. Not dada, not mama, grandpa." Through the phone speaker, I heard my grandson babbling in his innocent way, unaware that his future had just been secured by a grandfather he'd learned to know honestly. "Tell him I'll see him soon," I said, and meant it. October brought crisp mornings in the kind of clear light that makes everything look possible. I sat on my front porch with coffee and my phone, reading Noah's daily messages that had become the highlight of my routine. Today's photos showed Leo taking his first independent steps, reaching towards something off camera with the determined curiosity of someone discovering the world. "Walking at 11 months," his text read, "heading straight for your toolbox in the garage photo. Maybe he inherited more than your eyes." The transformation in our relationship had been gradual, earned through daily conversations that slowly rebuilt trust, like careful construction work. Noah had surprised his Harmony Lakes neighbors by openly introducing me as his father when I'd visited last month, his voice carrying pride instead of shame for the first time in years. Sarah had adjusted to the new reality with the practical acceptance of someone who'd realized legal battles couldn't change fundamental truths about family and sacrifice. The children treated me as their grandfather now. No more family friend pretenses, no more careful editing of conversations. My phone buzzed with another message, a video of Leo babbling seriously at a picture book, his tiny fingers tracing images of construction vehicles, with the focused attention that reminded me of Noah at that age, back when he'd helped me sort screws in my workshop. 24 years and a month until he inherits," I said to the morning air, calculating the time Leo would have to grow into understanding what his inheritance really meant. The trust document sat in my kitchen drawer, complex legal language that translated into simple hope that my grandson would value foundations over facades, character over connections, the satisfaction of building something that lasted with his own hands. Noah's latest phone calls had been different, longer, more honest, filled with memories he'd rediscovered now that shame no longer blocked access to our shared history. He'd found the courage to tell Leo stories about his Oklahoma grandfather, the man who taught him to fish and fix things and stand up straight in any room he entered. "Not about revenge," I murmured, watching hawks circle overhead in the distance. "Never. It was about dignity, about memory, about making sure love outlasts embarrassment." The afternoon mail brought an envelope with Leo's handprints pressed in clay, accompanied by Noah's note, "For Grandpa's workshop, so you remember you're building something important." I carried the clay impression to my garage workshop, where sawdust and honest tools created the kind of atmosphere that Noah had once found comfortable before European trips and organic everything became more important than family connection. The handprints found their place on my workbench, small reminders of potential and promise. By the time Leo turned 25, these tiny hands would be capable of real work, real creation, real understanding of what it meant to build something that lasted. My phone rang as the sun began its descent toward the Oklahoma horizon. Noah's voice carried the easy warmth of someone who'd finally learned to be comfortable with truth. "We're planning Christmas in Oklahoma, Dad. Leo's excited to meet his grandfather properly, and I want him to show him where his dad learned to be strong." I rocked in my chair, watching stars appear in the darkening sky, while my grandson babbled cheerfully in the background of our conversation. Noah's laughter mixed with Leo's innocent sounds, creating the kind of family music I thought was lost forever. "Bring your appetite," I said. "I'm planning to teach him about real cooking. Simple food prepared with attention and love." "He'll love that, Dad. We all will." After hanging up, I sat in the peaceful darkness, holding the fishing photo that traveled from Noah's hidden garage to my honored place on the kitchen counter. 3 generations of family history in one small image. Proof that foundations could survive, even when the structures built on top of them forgot their origins. The phone rang again, Noah calling back, with something he'd forgotten to mention. His voice bubbling with the kind of excitement that reminded me of the little boy who used to believe his father could fix anything. Dad, I almost forgot. Leo said his second word today. What was it? Hammer! Clear as anything. Sarah thinks it's a coincidence, but I know better. I smiled into the Oklahoma night, understanding that some inheritances begin long before legal documents take effect, passed down through blood and memory, and the persistent love that builds foundations strong enough to last generations.